What transpires when police officers are found involved in corrupt, malevolent, or unlawful conduct? Here we have 4 instances of law enforcement personnel facing the prospect of incarceration. Brace yourself as things are about to take a surprising turn. Tyler Moody is on the verge of encountering the most astonishing moment of his life as he steps into the interrogation room.
So let me just make it easy. You're fired. You're no longer an employee here. You understand? You've betrayed the trust of every citizen that we have the privilege to serve. And you've betrayed the trust of the brave and selfless men and women that you've worked alongside for nearly 3 years. So as of this moment, you're under arrest for bringing a prohibited item, a cell phone, into a correctional facility. That's a 3rd-degree felony. Do you have any questions about that?
No, sir.
Well, you're going to be cuffed. First thing I want you to do is stand up and take that uniform shirt off. You don't deserve to wear it.
During questioning, it came to light that Tyler, an inmate facing a murder charge, had in his possession a mobile phone and charger. Under scrutiny, Tyler promptly admitted to his transgressions. However, he soon grasped that the repercussions of smuggling contraband were much more severe than he had initially expected. Currently, Tyler is serving a 1-year prison term for supplying a prisoner with a mobile phone, finding himself incarcerated in the same institution where he once served as a police officer. Nonetheless, in stark contrast to Tyler, Stephanie Lazarus did not receive a lenient outcome for her actions. After an exhaustive investigation spanning decades, DNA evidence finally directed suspicion towards Stephanie as the potential perpetrator of a murder that took place in 1986. Given the gravity of the case, the detectives carefully devised their strategy for the interrogation. Stephanie, a high accomplished detective who had earned commendations for her work on a theft case, was lured in under the pretext of being sought out for assistance on another case. To ensure confidentiality and to put Stephanie at ease, the detectives opted for the interrogation room as the setting for their conversation.
Not really. I knew that he got married years ago.
Did you ever meet him?
God, I don't know.
Do you know who he was?
Well, I think it's been a long time ago. I may have met her.
They explained that it was the least likely place to be overheard.
Waive time and agree to continue your arraignment to July 6th this year.
Yes, Your Honor.
Emphasizing the need to maintain strict confidentiality about the case. Following the discovery of Sherry Rasmussen's body, which displayed 3 gunshot wounds, initial suspicions centered around her murder being a result of a failed burglary. However, the case went cold when the identity of the suspect remained unknown. Fast forward 23 years later, during a review of the case, detectives stumbled upon evidence that pointed to Stephanie, a woman who had been entangled in a love triangle with Sherry and her husband, John Rutten. Armed with this new information, the detectives strategically broached John's name during their conversation with Stephanie, closely observing her reactions. As they engaged in dialogue, both parties tried to maintain a friendly and relaxed atmosphere. However, Stephanie's mounting anxiety became increasingly evident. Despite the detectives providing a somewhat plausible pretext for their meeting, Stephanie found herself in an interrogation room facing intense questioning about a murder allegedly committed 2 decades ago. Her breathing quickened, her language turned defensive, and her movements grew more erratic, all reflective of her heightened unease and apprehension. In a bid to prove her innocence, Stephanie decided to offer DNA evidence, hoping that her cooperation would demonstrate her lack of involvement. However, her hopes were dashed when a mere 5 minutes later, the detectives abruptly concluded the questioning and placed her under arrest. After months of enduring a grueling trial, the jury eventually reached a verdict. Stephanie was sentenced to a significant 27 years in prison after being convicted on a single felony charge of first-degree murder. However, for the next cop, Jaylen Fleer, dealing with just one felony charge seemed like a relatively manageable situation, almost like child's play. In April 2020, the San Diego police received tips concerning a man suspected of engaging in inappropriate activities with a local child.
Mr. Fleer, you understand that you are to have no contact with these 3 people. That means you cannot harass, strike, threaten, assault or sexually or otherwise, follow, stalk, molest, destroy or damage personal real property, disturb the peace, keep under surveillance, or block movements of these 3 people.
After 2 months of investigation, all evidence pointed towards Jaylen as the person of interest. When the allegations were brought up, Jaylen visibly displayed signs of stress. Leaning forward in his chair, he softly clasped his hands together and clenched his jaw, clearly anxious about the impending confrontation. The detectives assured him that he wasn't presently under arrest and had the freedom to leave at any time. Nonetheless, they made a deliberate effort to create a relaxed environment, adopting a cheerful and friendly demeanor to put him at ease. However, Jaylen grew increasingly distressed, swaying in his chair and becoming guarded with his responses. The detectives were about to escalate the pressure even further. The account that shared the photo and information went by the name J178211, seemingly a random combination of numbers. However, upon closer examination, it became evident that 17 was Jaylen's college baseball jersey number, 82 was his high school jersey number, and 2011 was the year he graduated. The fact that this account possessed such specific knowledge indicated that if it was operated by someone who held animosity towards Jaylen, they had conducted thorough research. Following the interrogation, Daniel was placed on administrative leave. However, this did not signal the end of the investigation. Just 2 months later, an additional 12 women came forward with allegations against him.
Talked about me having like over $4,000 worth of tickets. He comes to the bed and he takes off his belt. His private is out. He didn't say nothing. He just basically know what to do. At this moment, I'm thinking like I don't have a choice. I'm in survival mode. I gotta do it.
Consequently, he was later arrested as the mounting evidence and testimonies against him continued to grow. Daniel was ultimately found guilty on 18 of the 36 charges brought against him. Consequently, he received a staggering sentence of 263 years in prison with no possibility of parole. This severe sentence underscores the seriousness of the crimes he committed and ensures that he will spend the remainder of his life incarcerated.